Welcome again to Off the Page. I'm Leslie Choice, and my guest today has taken on a formidable challenge of writing a novel about the lives of elephants. She's from Toronto, where I don't think they have too many elephants. Her name is Barbara Gowdy. Hi, Barbara.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Have you written about the lives of animals before?
No, I haven't, but I've written about sort of disenfranchised people who don't usually speak for themselves in fiction, and so there was kind of a natural evolution of going right out of the species if I was at the edge anyway. And I'm a leap of imagination writer. I like to imagine lives completely unlike my own, so this was just another challenge in that direction.
It's a gamble, though, isn't it? Like this kind of thing, writing the animal type story. I would think that it really is a gamble that could easily fail.
Yeah, I was aware when I was writing it that this might be my middle-age folly, and then I thought, well, it'll be a grand folly, you know, I'll fall from a height. And I would turn on the cartoons in the morning and see animals talk and think, you know, oh God, is this what I'm doing? I had a big fear of the Disney word. But I also knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted these elephants to be as intelligent as we know them to be. They do have big, complex brains. They do have an infrasonic language, a low vocalization language. I call it language. The scientists call it vocalizations, but it seems to have even syntax and pronouns. And we know they're highly socialized, and we know they're conscious, and to the extent that they recognize they're dead, and they seem to be aware of being dead and alive. They have burying ceremonies.
How do we know this? You say we know all these things, but how do we?
Well, the animal scientists in the field who've been working with the elephants for 30 years, which is only as long as they've really been studied in any depth by the Western world. Before the 60s, we didn't really know much about African elephants, but there are people there that have been working with them day after day and trying to protect them because they're disappearing species, as all species other than us are, and seagulls in Toronto, that's about it for the thriving species. They've been working with them and trying to protect them, and they have made these remarkable discoveries, one of them being the infrasonic language. The morning ceremonies, for example, and this is what got me wanting to write this book in the first place. About 5 years ago, I was watching a documentary, a National Geographic documentary, and it showed a family of elephants coming upon an elephant skeleton, and they immediately surrounded it, got very quiet and reverential seeming, picked up and fondled the bones very carefully, put them down. Even the youngsters did this.
Wow, with their trunks.
With their trunks.
They would lift them?
Yeah, and their trunks are very prehensile. To the object. Well, look at it, fondle it, touch it, taste it, carefully put it back where they found it, pick up another, cradle it. Then they covered these bones with sticks and dirt, smashed a few. Sometimes they'll take them away to cover them up. And what's more, Cynthia Moss says, when it's the skeleton of a relative that was very close to them, a sister or a daughter that somehow got away from the herd, they'll spend a lot more time. Whoever was closest to that elephant will mourn a lot longer. She's seen this dozens of times. What really got to me, though, was then they turned and lifted one hind foot up and passed just above the bones. And she says, I have seen this, and she called it a ceremony, dozens of times, and I don't know what it means unless they're sensing some emanation.
Wow.
I just had shivers going up and down my back when I saw that, and so I started to research elephants just, you know, as a hobby, a zoological hobby, and read everything I could, and then it started to occur to me when I realized how intelligent they were, and how gentle and what they're suffering. You know, you don't need Steven Spielberg in here to create a bad man. They got it. It's humans hunting them for trinkets, ivory.
And you would have us believe that elephants are truly emotional. If anything, your book suggests, the book is called The White Bone, suggests that the level of their emotions are deeper, maybe even more complex than human emotions?
Well, we don't even know the complexity of our own emotions, and that's especially true of men. But this, of course, is a novel. This is fiction, and it's leap of imagination, and it's incredibly presumptuous in its appropriation, and it might be 99% wrong if an elephant were to read this and throw it across the room. But given all that, I did all the research I could, and what I tried to do was make what these elephants were doing as close to a National Geographic documentary as possible, and then I invested them with very high intention, We don't know the mind of other animals. We try and measure and we try and measure. We hardly know the minds of those closest to us in our own species. I often compare it to, trying to take the temperature with a slide rule. We're using these precision instruments, but we might be getting it all wrong. The mind of an animal, the more you try and get into it, is a mystery. But given all that, there are ways that we measure things. Elephants do weep, elephants do mourn, elephants do seem to be coy, they make jokes, they are lusty, they get into such depressions that when one of their own die close to them, that they won't eat or sleep and they actually die of broken hearts. That's a little more deeply than we mourn.
Yeah, so if they have all of that emotion and that very rich psychic life and a kind of intelligence, it's certainly, there's much more cruelty there to the fact that we're still killing them.
And we're not killing them for food. We're killing them for
ornaments,
ivory.
Yeah.
The giant carcass lies there rotting. And the sad thing about this is that elephants are really crucial to their environment. They're the ones in droughts that dig the water holes that all the other animals use and people use as well.
They fertilize the plants?
They fertilize the plants. There are certain seeds that, unless they go through an elephant's very rapid digestive system, cannot germinate. And they're just these huge, magnificent, gentle animals. They don't kill. The other funny thing is, I think because they're intelligent and because we're slaughtering them, they'd be out to get us, as we would. If we knew of any species that was dead set on killing us for our toenails, we'd be out to get that species. Well, the only other bones that they appear to mourn in this way, they don't mourn cheetah bones or zebra bones, are human bones. There aren't a great many recorded incidents of elephants coming across human bones because they're not left lying around, but there are some, and they will pick them up and fondle them in the same way. And there are stories of people who've gone to sleep or haven't felt well, lying down on the plain and finding themselves covered in sticks and leaves and surrounded by elephants, making low moans and touching them very gently and clearly mourning them.
So there's some connection there with the elephants making recognition of human intelligence, perhaps, at least that much.
Well, in my book, I decided that we are fallen elephants in their cosmology, at which they would be the top of understanding. And I have all the animals in this book believing they are the top species, and giving themselves grandiose names. But in my book, the elephants think that humans are fallen. And so they feel a great deal of pity for us, fear of us, of course, but pity for us, and that we lost our elephantism.
Now, how do you establish the personal link that's necessary between you and main character? His name is Mud, young female elephant.
How do I feel the sympathy necessary?
How do you establish the personal link between you, the writer, and that character?
Well, first of all, I spent a long time studying them, and about 50 pages into the book, I realized I had to go to Africa and look at them, and I had an opportunity to go with my sister, who has diamond properties in Botswana. She's trading on the unlisted under TNK, her stock, currently down because of de Guzman and Briex, but a solid stock nevertheless. Anyway, she was able to take me there, and Canada Council gave me a bit of a grant too, but that would have landed me in the middle of the ocean. It would have got me as far as I needed to go. And we were in the Masai Mara during the wildebeest migration, and I was able to look at them for a long time, and I was so immersed, Leslie. I mean, I stared at them there. I read every book I could get. I thought about them. I started dreaming about them. And it's sort of a natural thing for me too anyway. Whenever I've always have some pets or other, and I always find myself trying to imagine the world from their point of view in order to be a better keeper of them. What does this creature need? What does it want? What does it think of me? And it's a natural inclination for me, and I think most of us write to sensibility. And it is my sensibility to look for the story out there, the what if, the once upon a time, far, far away. Far, far away used to be an experience in here, and now I really have far, far away in experience and place, set in a place not unlike Kenya.
Yeah. Introduce me to the character, Mud.
Well, Mud is the main character. This book is told from the point of view of 3 elephants, Mud, Datebed, and Tall Time. Mud, they all get their names, the calves, from the circumstances surrounding their births. Mud was found in a pool of muck, deserted by her family who had left her for dead, and adopted by another family. And how I name these elephants is I preface every name with she, the cow names, in recognition that they are matrilinear and that their god is called the she. And every family has its family sounds, so there are the she-ems, the she-esses, the she-tes, and then your name uses the family sound, and then also some facet of your character that's usually unflattering and that you're trying to overcome. So Mud is also, when she gets her cow name at Estra, she spurns, and the story starts with her not liking that name and not feeling attached to her family. And in this book, the two things I found myself investigating were memory, because it's true, elephants never forget, it seems to be true, and the old fictional theme of the individual versus society, because Mud is in a herd and actually wants to get out of this herd. And what does that mean? How do you survive separate from the herd? And I think that's partly my own need to be alone a lot.
Well, here, now you're getting onto something I wanted to ask you next, which it's that old, sometimes a fallacy, but the absurd question that everyone asks a novelist in reading a novel: how much of your story is in this one? This is a book about elephants in Africa, and is it even possible to ask this question and say how much of your story is somehow in here?
The hot truths, you know, I'm not an elephant, I haven't survived drought and slaughter. This is a typical quest book, they're looking for a safe place. That hasn't happened to me. And I call those things in fiction the cold facts, or the furniture. Yes. Even. The hot facts, which to me are the moral and emotional truths, have to be filtered through me in order to get them right. And I have found in writing that if you really concentrate on getting those things right, how things feel, why things turn out the way they do, what it means, there's a universal truth to that. Certainly happiness feels the same to you as it does to me: sadness, anger, lust, physical pain. And I think that's true of animals. You put a knife in my back, your back, a dog's back, an elephant's back, and you step on an ant. We're not all thinking of Nietzsche at that point. We're just thinking that really hurts right there, really badly. And
Mud is a bit of a visionary. Are you a kind of visionary in fiction anyway?
No, I don't think that. I just think what she and I have in common, what I have in common with the elephants, was a great preoccupation at the time I was writing this with memory. And they think they are memory. I actually say that they believe that memory is a vital substance like blood, and when they lose their memory they'll die. That they are composed of memory. And I was thinking of memory a lot because my father had just died unexpectedly. He'd been diagnosed of cancer. He was fit and ready to go on many more years, and a young man for his age. And he went rather quickly. And just as I was thinking about writing this book, and then as I started writing it, and I found myself sort of railing against memory, that deep memory in which a cough that sounds like the beloved's cough can rake you, feel so tragic. And yet I also had to realize that memory gives us our moral context. I think we'd suffer less, but we'd also be less moral. And
a writer relies heavily upon memory, and as you say, filtering through your imagination, perhaps, creating. But when you say elephants remember everything, this means like every instance of their life, every smell, every sight that they've seen, and it can be recalled in some way, at least in your fiction.
I heard that was the case. What I always did with the fiction was whenever I heard something about an elephant that might hint at very high intelligence or intention, I gave it to them in my fiction.
Yes.
Scientists previously, and not so much anymore, but scientists previously had always attributed to animals, other than human animals, the most brute and stupid of intention, because to do otherwise would seem sentimental, and also would raise all sorts of moral issues. You know, how can we brutalize and kill them if they're this smart? Rather not know. So I always went the other way, and if there was a hint of it, I went completely the other way and gave them the highest and the most conscious of intentions. So Daphne Sheldrick, who is David Sheldrick's widow and has worked with the animal orphans, including elephants, in Kenya for 30 years outside Nairobi, and is attributed with knowing maybe the most there is to know about them, says she thinks it's true they never forget. The babies who witness the culls, the parents, mothers and sisters being murdered, wake up screaming the rest of their lives. Not only that, You show a baby elephant a pond or a stick or something, and 30 years later, she says, they've never seen it again, and as 30 years later, as an adult, they know exactly where that is.
Amazing.
The tragedy of getting rid of the older elephants is that elephants, just like us, have similar lifespans, similar long learning curves. You have to teach the young how to be elephants and why you need this memory. And when you kill the big ones for your tusks, it would be similar to killing everyone in Halifax over 15 and letting the rest run the place. They don't have no experience. She thinks they may have mnemonic memories, which means that they are almost burdened with walking into this room and remembering it all, and then if something like my drink were taken out of the room, it would look like a different room, because that drink was there.
That's fascinating.
It is, isn't it?
We're going to take a short break. My guest today is Barbara Gowdy, and we'll be right back after this. Hi, and we're back. I'm Leslie Choice. This is Off the Page. My guest today is Barbara Gowdy. We're talking about her novel, The White Bone. We're also talking about elephants. Your novel is truly an alternate reality of some sorts. It's the elephant world. Is there a spiritual dimension to their lives?
Yeah, I have them. I thought about that, and I thought, since they do mourn and bury their dead, I would give them a spiritual dimension. Why do we assume we're the only ones that have it? Once again, it's more convenient for us to assume that, but it's not necessarily the truth, and who can prove otherwise? So for more interesting fiction, I gave them a spiritual dimension. How do they look at the world? Do they pray? Do they worship? What do they think the sun is? And of course, I have them thinking they're the top species. The sun is the eye of their god, which is an elephant cow, and the moon is the elephant's son, and he is somewhat malevolent. And I have them singing very long hymns, of which I will provide several verses, but the hymns go on for about 500 verses, partly because everything would be slowed down, I think, if you're that big and you spend as much time eating. And partly because they could remember 500, if they have these sorts of memories, they could remember a 500-verse hymn. And the hymns are clues to their spirituality and their cosmology. And but I also must say there's a great deal of my Presbyterian upbringing in these hymns.
So it is in there a little bit of human religion?
Yeah, as we understand it, or as from their point of view, they could say within our religions there's a bit of elephant cosmology.
Okay. Yeah, well, we've talked a lot about elephants, a lot about your novel. Where did you grow up anyway?
I was born in Windsor the day that the Korean War started, stole my thunder. We moved to Toronto during Hurricane Hazel in 1954, and at that time, I have a sister a year older, a sister who took me to Kenya, and a brother 2 years older. And we moved to Don Mills, North America's first planned community. And then 7 years, 1957, my mother had another daughter, so there's 4 of us. And I grew up in a very safe, pretty neighborhood where everyone was the same and all the parents are the same. And it was a very safe place from which to go out and, explore your mind in the library or later explore the world. It was a safe nucleus. We lived all in these little bungalows.
It sounds very safe and very normal, yet I've read your other books, and you write about some really strange and difficult and dark and dangerous human territory.
I do, and there's an assumption, when there are pieces written on me, that there's always an assumption, well, for all she protests otherwise, she must have had a really weird upbringing to write this way, and I didn't. And I think myself, I think partly my mother has a very dark sense of humor. My father had artistic inclinations. He was a drummer and an artist, and he had normal, so-called normal profession out there in the world to earn money, but his heart was in the arts. And we were allowed to let our minds go into places that kids' minds in the suburbs aren't usually allowed to go.
For example, if you could just introduce me to a couple of your protagonists in previous novels. Who were they?
Well, I have a very early novel, by the way, called with the atrocious title, not mine, Through the Green Valley, which is quite a classical Irish historical novel. No one really odd there. Then I wrote Falling Angels, which is about a family in a place not unlike Don Mills, where the mother is an alcoholic, and the father is a sort of one of these bankrupt men who came back from the war and raised his children like a sergeant general, and he built a bomb shelter in the basement and made them all go down there and test it out for 2 weeks. That was someone in our neighborhood. I mean,
Yes.
we were sort of fine, but I always felt we were surrounded by weirdos. There was a man in our neighborhood who did build a bomb shelter during the Cuban crisis, and he will go
It seemed
nameless.
like a reasonable thing to do at the time, actually.
Well, he appeared in the paper holding a gun, standing in front of it, saying, if anyone tries to get in here, I'll shoot them. And what always, I guess doesn't sound all that charitable, but the truth of the fact is that at the time, I thought, if our species is to go on and they're going to be the representatives, they were very odd families. I thought they were very strange looking and strangely behaved. And all the rest of us dying was one tragedy, and them surviving was the other. And then in We So Seldom Look on Love, the short stories, those stories were, every one of them was based on some rumor I heard, where the behavior or what was going on was very odd and even repulsive, but wasn't harming anybody.
Yes.
And what was interesting to me was the way we look at things and we judge things and what we choose to say is normal and not normal, and what we choose to sort of allow in our lives and in our world. So in that there was a story called Sylvie, where a woman is a so-called freak, which is what she would have called herself, and she's based on a real live Barnum and Bailey exhibitor who had 4 legs, 2 wombs, had children from each womb, and she exhibited. And the interesting thing about the real woman is she didn't have to exhibit. She could have hidden her little legs, her second set of legs, under the full skirts they wore at the time. And she was married to a doctor, and he had money, but she chose to exhibit. And there was, it's become fairly well known, somewhat to my regret, because it's a small ironic story, the title story, We So Seldom Look on Love, which is about a woman who is in love with dead men. She's a necrophile. Once again, based on a story I read.
Now, most folks would say these are pretty strange subjects to be writing about. At the very beginning of the show, you talked about this business of the leap of the imagination. Is that partly what allows you to sort of drive to create the engine of a story? Whether it's some of those short stories you're talking about, or whether it's the life of an elephant, do you really need to push back past what's simple and normal to get into some challenging territory for yourself?
Maybe I do. Maybe I do. Maybe that's interesting to me. But you know, I always, my sympathy is always with sort of the disenfranchised, those who don't write. I mean, there's a lot of stories about normal people in abnormal situations. There's not a lot of stories about abnormal people in normal situations. And the challenge is to show you how normal, actually, underneath it all, they really are. And that what we flinch from, you know, we should be careful. Be careful who you hate, because it might be someone you love, you know. And once you get under the surface, and my natural sympathy is with difference, I think, because it's so hard to be different, and we'll do anything not to be. I mean, everyone's starting to get plastic surgery to look like one pretty actress in California somewhere, you know.
Do you ever hit any dead ends? You know, as you make these imaginary leaps into very difficult characters, difficult situations, to bring them more human? Do you
mean to start writing and it just doesn't work?
Yep.
Hasn't happened yet, Leslie.
Wow.
And I'm worried that it will, you know, because every time I finish a book, I think this is the end. I'm washed up. There's no more. I look for another profession. You know, I follow my letter carrier around, wondering if maybe I could do that too.
It's always an option, and writers always have to keep their options open.
That's right.
We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Barbara Gowdy right after this. Hi, you're watching Off the Page. My guest today has been Barbara Gowdy. Barbara, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And I thank you for watching Off the Page. I'm Leslie Choice, and I'll see you again next time.